The scream echoed down the hallway and nailed me to the cold tiles, as if I were a criminal caught in the act. With my heart galloping in my old chest. I am Frances. I am 68 years old, and I have fed half the neighborhood with my own hands. But here I seem to be in the way. My son-in-law thinks I am a stinking burden, but he forgot to read the name on the deed to this house. I have always been a light sleeper, the kind of woman who wakes up when the wind changes or when a cat meows 3 streets away. I guess it comes with the territory. I spent 40 years running the kitchen at the Copper Pot, my little restaurant downtown. There, if you fell asleep, your rice burned or your suppliers robbed you blind. I learned to stay alert, to be efficient, to never let a single thing slip by. But old age is treacherous. It strips away the confidence you have in your own body, little by little, like the ocean eating away the sand on the beach, until you don't even realize there's nowhere left to put your towel. That night, my stomach played a cruel trick on me. Maybe it was the beans from dinner, or maybe my guts just don't have the patience they used to. I got up with that dull, urgent ache that us old folks know all too well, dragging my slippers down the hall so I wouldn't make a sound. I tried to be as stealthy as a ghost in my own home, and I say my own home, with full intention, even though sometimes, based on the way they look at me, you'd think I was an unwanted guest who overstayed her welcome. The bathroom in this apartment has terrible acoustics, and old pipes groan. I did what I had to do, wrestling with the deep shame of a body that no longer runs like a Swiss watch. I flushed the toilet, or, at least, I tried to. The handle was loose, a quick fix that Robert, my son-in-law, had promised to take care of 3 weeks ago. Naturally, he hadn't touched it. The water drained timidly, lacking any real force, leaving the evidence of my midnight emergency behind. That was when the hallway light flicked on, blinding me completely. Robert was standing right there in his doorframe, eyes swollen with sleep, wearing a look of pure disgust that broke my soul worse than any physical blow could have. He was shirtless. His crossed arms drew an unbreakable barrier between his arrogant youth and my vulnerable age. "For God's sake, Frances," he bellowed, not caring for a second that it was 3 in the morning. "You useless old woman. You can't even use a toilet, right? The whole house stinks." His words weren't just sound, they were lashes from a whip. I stood completely paralyzed, my hands still resting on that broken silver handle, shivering, not from the cold, but from a hot, suffocating humiliation crawling up my neck. The smell, I admit, wasn't a bed of roses, but it was the smell of humanity, of illness, of age. "Robert, the handle." I tried to explain. My voice cracked. I felt tiny, like a little girl being scolded. "Excuses." He cut me off, pinching his nose with a theatrical flair that hurt worse than the insult itself. "You always have an excuse. You smell like a corpse, Frances. Pure rot. Shut that door and spray some air freshener. I have to work tomorrow, and you're keeping us awake with your filth." He slammed his door. The impact rattled the picture frames on the walls. The frames I bought. On the walls I painted. I was left entirely alone in the harsh, raw light of the bathroom, staring at myself in a mirror smeared with the toothpaste they never bothered to wipe away. The woman staring back at me had wild gray hair and watery eyes, but beneath that heavy coat of sadness, I saw something else. I saw the Frances who built a business out of thin air when her husband died. I saw the woman who paid for her daughter Lucy's college degree by selling thousands of meat pies and stews. "Useless old woman," he had said. "Stinks." I cleaned the bathroom. I cleaned it with a quiet, terrifying fury. At 3:30 in the morning, I poured bleach. I scrubbed the porcelain until my knuckles turned bone white. I sprayed that cheap lavender air freshener until the air became unbreathable, thick with chemical perfume. I didn't do it for him. I did it because I am not a dirty woman. I am a decent woman. I went back to my room, but sleep had already slipped out the window. I sat on the edge of my bed, running my hands over the cotton sheets I brought from my old house. My bedroom is small. the smallest in the apartment. Because when I moved in 2 years ago, I insisted they take the master suite. So you can have your space, I told them. What a fool I was. Lucy, my daughter, never came out of her room during the screaming. I know she heard it. She's a light sleeper, just like me. Her silence was worse than Robert's shouting. Her silence was the ultimate confirmation that she, too, in some dark corner of her mind, thought the exact same thing. That I was a burden, that I smelled bad, that I was just in the way. I waited for the sun to come up. I listened to the sounds of the city waking up, the garbage truck, the early morning buses, the distant whistle of the factories. Every sound was a reminder that the world kept turning, completely indifferent to my pain. But I am not the kind of woman who sits around licking her wounds. My father always used to say, if you fall down, you get back up and check what you've got in your pockets. Just like I do every single day. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee, dark and strong, started a war against the chemical lavender, bleeding out from the bathroom. I set the table. Robert came out first, dressed in his cheap suit and a tie he never quite knows how to match. He walked right past me without a glance, went straight for the coffee pot, poured himself a mug, and drank it standing up, his eyes glued to his phone. Not a good morning, not an apology, nothing. To him, I was just another piece of furniture, one that occasionally smelled bad and had to be tolerated. Then Lucy walked out. She did look at me, but it was a fleeting, guilty glance. Mom, she started, her voice soft. Sit down and eat your breakfast, honey, I said. My tone was so flat it even surprised me. There was no affection in it, just habit. Robert was just really tired last night, she whispered, nervously scraping butter onto a piece of toast. You know how he gets when he's woken up. Don't mind him. I'm not minding him, I replied, turning my back to her to wash a spoon that wasn't even dirty. Eat. You're going to be late. Robert huffed from the living room, digging around for his keys. Tell her to shut her door tight next time. Seriously, Lucy. It's unbearable. It feels like we're living in a nursing home. Lucy didn't defend him, but she didn't defend me, either. She just lowered her head and took a bite of her toast. In that exact moment, something inside me snapped. It wasn't a bone, and it wasn't an artery. It was the very last thread of hope I was clinging to. The hope that this was still a family. I looked around the apartment. The solid oak dining table they were eating on was mine, an heirloom from my grandmother. The Italian leather sofa, where Robert propped up his dirty feet, was mine, bought with the profits from my best year at the restaurant. The double-door refrigerator, the microwave, the washer, the 60-inch flat-screen TV, all of it was mine. When I sold my big house and the restaurant to finally rest, I used that money to buy this apartment. I put it in my name, thank God, and thank the stubbornness of my notary, an old friend who never trusted modern sons-in-law. But I let them believe they were doing me a favor by taking care of me. I let them live here rent-free, only splitting the utility bills, so they could save up and buy their own place someday. But in 2 years, they haven't saved a single dime. They've traveled, they've eaten out, they've bought designer clothes. And I am the useless old woman. We're leaving, Robert announced from the door, not even bothering to say goodbye to me. Lucy, hurry up. Bye, Mom. See you tonight, my daughter said, pressing a quick, dry, obligatory kiss to my cheek. I hope you have a good day, I said. And I meant it. I wanted them to have a great day, far, far away from me. The door shut with the heavy metallic click of the deadbolt. Silence flooded back into the apartment. But this time, it didn't feel lonely. It felt full of possibilities. I walked over to the window and watched them walk out of the building. Robert was walking fast, staring at his phone, while Lucy jogged slightly behind him, trying to keep up. They got into their car, a late model they bought 3 months ago because their old one just didn't have style. I sighed and turned around. I walked to the center of the living room and just stood there, feeling the space. Useless old woman, I repeated softly, testing the flavor of the words. They tasted like ash, but they also tasted like gasoline. I went to my bedroom and pulled open the drawer of my nightstand. There, tucked beneath my rosaries and my blood pressure medication, was my old contact book, the Copper Potts Black Book. I flipped through the yellowed pages with wrinkled, steady fingers. I went to the M section. Meat suppliers, mechanics, movers, Artie's Moving Company. Arthur, the owner, had been a customer of mine for 20 years, a man of his word, the kind they just don't make anymore. He always said my beef stew gave his boys the strength to carry pianos. I dialed his number on my cell phone. My pulse wasn't shaking. In fact, I felt calmer than I had in years. "Hello," a gruff voice answered on the third ring. "Artie, it's Francis." From the copper pot, there was a pause, followed by a warm, booming laugh on the other end of the line. "Miss Francis, it's a miracle. How is the best cook in the city doing? We haven't heard from you in ages." "I'm doing well, Artie. Or rather, I'm going to be doing well. I need a service. Whatever you need, ma'am. What are we moving?" I looked around. I looked at the leather sofa, the oak table, the silk curtains. I looked toward the kitchen, where my stainless steel appliances gleamed. "Everything, Artie," I said, my voice rock solid. "I need the biggest truck you've got, and I need it right now. I'm emptying the apartment." "Right now?" he asked, surprised. "Is it an emergency?" "Let's just say it is. There's a bad smell in the house, and I need to clear everything out so it can air properly. Understand? We'll be there in 40 minutes, with the full crew." "Where are we taking the stuff?" "To that storage unit you guys have on the south side. For now, I just want it all locked up. I'll be staying at a hotel for a few days." "Done. 40 minutes. Better start packing the fragile stuff." I hung up the phone, and a massive wave of adrenaline crashed over me. It wasn't fear, it was power. I marched into the kitchen and pulled out a roll of heavy-duty black trash bags. I walked to the bathroom, the very stage of my humiliation just hours before. I opened Robert's cabinet. I grabbed his expensive cologne, his fancy creams, his electric razor. All of it went straight into the bag. I marched into Lucy's room, her makeup, her cheap costume jewelry she left scattered everywhere, into the bag. No. Wait. I stopped myself. That would be sinking to his level. That would be vandalism. I am not that kind of woman. I took their things back out of the bags and laid them carefully on their bed. I wasn't going to touch their personal belongings. I was going to take my things. And the real problem for them was that in this house, it felt like I had even bought the air they breathed. I moved with an energy I thought I had lost decades ago. I started taking down the paintings. I wrapped the porcelain figurines in newspaper. I unplugged the giant TV. I emptied the refrigerator of all my food, leaving only their diet yogurts and cheap beers sitting right there on the kitchen floor. Because the refrigerator was leaving too. As I worked, I remembered every single sacrifice. I remembered the grease burns on my arms from boiling oil, just to pay for Lucy's tuition. I remembered the sleepless nights, crunching numbers at the kitchen table so they would never go without. I remembered when Robert lost his first job, and I filled their pantry for 6 straight months without ever asking for a dime in return. Useless old woman. I looked down at my hands. The hands of a worker. Hands that had kneaded dough, scrubbed floors, carried boxes, and cared for the sick. These hands were not useless. These hands had built this domestic empire, and these very same hands were going to tear it down to the studs. The doorbell rang exactly 40 minutes later. Artie arrived with 3 young, broad-shouldered guys. "Miss Francis." He greeted me with a massive bear hug that smelled of tobacco and honest sweat. "You haven't aged a day." "Thank you, Artie. Come in, come in. We don't have much time. I want you to take everything that has a green sticker on it." I had spent the last 20 minutes tearing off tiny pieces of green painter's tape and sticking them on every piece of furniture, every appliance, every lamp. Basically, The entire apartment looked like it had caught a green plague. "And the stuff without a sticker?" asked one of the young guys. Looking around, he was pointing at a couple of cheap plastic patio chairs they had brought in and a stained, old mattress sitting in the guest room. "That stays," I said. "So they can't say I left them with nothing. They got to work." Watching them dismantle the living room was bizarrely satisfying. It was like watching a necessary surgery to remove a tumor. The sofa went out the door. The dining table followed. The rugs were rolled up like cigars. The neighbors started poking their heads out. Mrs. Gertrude from 402, a professional gossip, stepped out with curlers in her hair. "Are you moving, neighbor?" she asked, her eyes wide as saucers. "Not exactly, Gertrude," I replied calmly, holding the door open so they could wheel the refrigerator past. "I'm just doing a deep spring cleaning. You know how garbage piles up sometimes. You have to sanitize the environment." By 11 in the morning, the apartment was an echo, an empty shell with indentations on the carpet where life used to sit. In the kitchen, only the sink remained, because it was bolted to the wall, and the stove, which unfortunately belonged to the building. In the living room, nothing. In my bedroom, nothing. In their bedroom, just their mattress on the floor and piles of clothes that I had to take out of the cedar wardrobe, which, of course, was also mine. I stood in the middle of the empty living room. The sun poured in unhindered through the bare windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The place looked bigger, brighter, and for the first time in 2 years, it actually smelled clean. Truly clean. I pulled out my keychain. I rubbed my thumb over the heavy brass keys that opened the front door and the deadbolt. There was still one final touch left. It wasn't enough to just leave. I had to make absolutely sure the message was received loud and clear, leaving no room for misinterpretation. I walked into the bathroom. The toilet was still there, white and solitary. I pulled a thick black permanent marker out of my purse. I knelt in front of the toilet lid. My pulse was still steady. I wrote directly on the white porcelain lid in large, unmistakable letters, "Here is the only throne you deserve. Use it in good health." I walked out into the hallway. Artie was waiting for me downstairs in the cab of the truck. I pulled the apartment door shut. I turned the deadbolt twice, but I didn't leave just yet. I pulled out my phone one more time. I had to make one last call before climbing into that truck and starting my new life. A call that would permanently change the rules of the game, because taking the furniture was only the opening act. I dialed the number for the property management company that ran the building. "Mr. Henderson?" "It's Francis. Yes, the owner of 5B. I have some new instructions regarding the lease agreement that we technically never signed with the current occupants. Yes. Listen closely, because you're going to want to hear this." As I spoke, I heard the elevator ding. My heart skipped a beat, thinking they had come home early, but it was only the water delivery guy. I smiled at him. Today was a great day. Today, the useless old woman was going to prove that she still knew exactly how to cook a dish best served ice cold. I walked down the stairs, my legs feeling lighter than they had in decades. I was ready to watch the world burn from the front row. The silence inside room 405 at the Plaza Hotel was so absolute that my ears actually rang at first. There were no slamming doors, no exasperated sighs, no giant television blaring reality shows about people screaming at each other. I sat on the edge of the bed, a massive king-sized bed with crisp, white, starched sheets that smelled like bleach and fresh laundry. Not like that cheap lavender spray I used to cover up my shame hours ago. I set my purse on the duvet. My hands, which had trembled with humiliation over a broken toilet just last night, now moved with surgical precision. I pulled out a worn leather binder, the one Robert always looked at with pure disdain because he said it smelled like an old person. What my son-in-law never bothered to learn was that inside that battered leather lay the entire history of my life. And more importantly, the property deed to the golden cage where he slept. I opened the binder and spread the documents across the bed. It was all there. The apartment deed, registered exclusively to Francis Elaine Morales, my investment statements, the money from the sale of the copper pot, and every single utility bill. For 2 years, I had made myself small. I had shrunk myself to fit into the tiny gap they left for me. Apologizing for existing, for taking up space, for having basic human bodily functions. Useless old woman, he had called me. I looked at the numbers on the papers. My eyes traced the balance of my savings. The fruit of 40 years of waking up at 4 in the morning to hand-pick the best tomatoes at the wholesale market. Useless, I whispered. The word sounded utterly ridiculous in the hum of the hotel's air. Conditioning, useless. I was the woman who negotiated with suppliers who circled like sharks when I was widowed at 40. I was the one who learned how to fix an industrial deep fryer with a butter knife. Because the repairman didn't show up, and the lunch rush was starting. I was the one who turned a rundown dive into the most respected restaurant downtown. And yet, I had allowed a man who couldn't even change a light bulb make me feel like a piece of trash. I got up and walked over to the mini fridge. I pulled out a cold, sparkling mineral water. As the bubbles hit my throat, I felt the heavy fog of sadness finally lift, making way for a mental clarity I hadn't felt in years. It was as if I had been in a medically induced coma, drugged by a mother's love and guilt. And Robert's scream had been the defibrillator that shocked me back to life. I walked over to the full-length mirror. I didn't see the disheveled, broken old woman from 3 a.m. anymore. I saw Francis. I saw the wrinkles, yes, but now they looked like maps of battles I had won. I saw my wide hips, the ones Lucy always complained about because she said they took up too much space in the hallway. And I remembered that those hips had carried children, crates of merchandise, and the crushing weight of an entire family. I took out my old calculator, the heavy gray Casio that had been with me since 1998. The numbers on the keys were faded from use, but my fingers knew the map by heart. I started doing the math. I added up the building's HOA fees. I paid those. I added up the electricity, the water, the gas. I paid those. I added up the high-speed fiber optic internet that Robert demanded for his online video games and movies. I paid that. I added up the bi-weekly maid service, even though they claimed I sat around doing nothing. I paid that too. The final number blinking on the LCD screen was an accusation. It was a small fortune. A fortune I was gifting them every single month in exchange for insults and contempt. I sat back down, the calculator in one hand, and Robert's bank statement in the other. Yes, I had access to his accounts. A year ago, when they fell behind on their credit card, Robert had come to me practically in tears, begging to borrow enough for the minimum payment. In his panic, he handed over his passwords so I could make the transfer. He never changed them. His sheer arrogance made him assume I was too stupid to remember a password or to figure out how to navigate online banking. I logged into the app on my phone. What I saw made me let out a dry, humorless laugh. The highly successful Robert, the man who looked down his nose at me in his polyester suits, was drowning in the red. They were living paycheck to paycheck. Worse than paycheck to paycheck. They owed money on the very shirts on their backs. Their savings were non-existent. They blew every cent on appearances, on expensive dinners just to post photos on social media, on that brand new car they could barely afford the lease on. So, useless old woman, I murmured, swiping my finger across the screen. Well, this useless old woman is the only thing standing between you and absolute homelessness, little boy. Reality hit me like a freight train. I wasn't the burden. I was the pillar. I was the foundation, the walls and the roof. They were just the cheap wallpaper rotting away from the damp. I remembered all the times Lucy had rolled her eyes and said, "Oh, Mom, you just don't understand how the modern world works." She was right. I don't understand a world where you spend money you don't have to impress people who don't care about you. But I do understand power. Power isn't screaming at 3 in the morning because something smells bad. Power is holding the keys to the valve that keeps everyone else's life running. And I had my hand resting right on the main shut-off valve. I leaned back against the pillows, lacing my hands behind my head. I thought about them. By now, they had to be on their way home from work. I pictured the scene. Robert jamming his key into the door, walking into the apartment expecting dinner on the table, or at least his favorite punching bag, standing there so he could vent his daily frustrations. Instead, they would find the void, the echo. But the void was only step one. Taking the furniture was an emotional reaction, a primal need to protect what was mine. Now came the strategy. Now it was time to show them that this old woman didn't just know how to scrub a toilet, she knew how to run a business. And this family, unfortunately, had become a failing business that required immediate corporate restructuring. I grabbed a piece of hotel stationery and my fountain pen, the one my late husband gave me before he passed. I started drafting the battle plan. I wasn't going to launch a frontal assault. I wasn't going to go over there and scream at them. That's vulgar. That's what Robert does. I was going to operate from the shadows, with the silent, lethal efficiency of a woman who had run a commercial kitchen for decades. First, utilities. Second, access. Third, legality. I checked my watch. 5 in the afternoon. The power and internet companies closed their offices at 6. I had time. I dialed the first number, my cable and internet provider. "Good afternoon," I said, using my sweetest, most syrupy voice. The one I use to calm down furious customers. "This is the account holder for 8940B. Yes, Francis Morales. Listen, sweetheart. It turns out I'm going out of town for a long trip, and I need to suspend my service immediately." "Oh yes, we can process that right away." "Wonderful, yes, cut everything off today." "No, don't even leave the basic cable. It's good to rest the eyes from all those screens." I hung up. A warm, glowing satisfaction settled right in my chest. I pictured Robert walking in, loosening his tie, dropping down onto the floor, because there was no couch, and trying to turn on the TV that wasn't there. Then trying to connect his phone to the Wi-Fi so he could complain on Facebook about having no Wi-Fi. Those 2 words, no connection, were going to hurt him worse than a slap to the face. Next, I called the power company. Emergencies? No. It's not an emergency, young man. It's a shut-off request due to major renovations. Yes, the apartment is vacant. Yes, I am the owner. I want the power cut first thing tomorrow morning. Why? Well, let's just say there's a problem with the wiring. Some parasites got into the system and they're draining way too much power. It's better to nip it in the bud before it starts a fire. You know what I mean? The kid on the phone didn't catch the metaphor, but he processed the work order. Tomorrow, when Robert's alarm went off, assuming his phone even had battery left, there would be no power for the coffee maker, no hot water for his shower. Nothing. I stood up and walked over to the window. From the 4th floor of the hotel, I watched the city move. People rushing by, cars honking. I felt like I was part of the world again. I was no longer the prisoner of the guest bedroom. My phone buzzed. It was Lucy. I let it ring. 1, 2, 3 times. It buzzed again. Robert. I let it ring. I wasn't ready to talk to them. Not yet. First, they had to understand the language of deprivation. They had to feel, on their own skin, what it meant to walk into a house that refused to welcome them. They had to smell their own misery without having anyone else to blame for it. I pulled a smaller envelope out of my binder. Inside was a business card the property manager had given me that morning when I called him before getting into the moving truck. Attorney Garrison, specialist in evictions and family disputes. A serious man, the kind who doesn't laugh at jokes, but bites like a pit bull the second you give the command. I was scheduled to see him tomorrow at 10 a.m., but my mind, as sharp as my chef's knives, was already drafting exactly what I was going to tell him. I didn't just want to throw them out. That would be too easy. They have squatters' rights, some would say. Their family, others would argue. But in my world, in Francis's world, respect is the only currency that matters. And they were flat broke. I thought back to the night before. The smell, my shame, the look of pure disgust on Robert's face. The whole house stinks. I smiled. A smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. You were right, Robert, I said to the empty room. It did stink. It stank of ingratitude. But don't worry, I'm airing the place out. I sat back on the bed and turned on the hotel TV. I flipped to a cooking channel. A chef was making a lamb stew. I analyzed his technique. He was missing rosemary, and he was sautéing the onions way too fast. Amateur, I critiqued out loud. Suddenly, I was starving. I hadn't eaten a single bite since that tense breakfast. I ordered room service, French onion soup, a peppercorn steak, and a glass of red wine. Yes, wine. Tonight, I was toasting alone. While I waited for the food, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text message from Robert. Curiosity got the better of me, so I opened it. Francis, what did you do? Where is my stuff? Where is the TV? Answer me or I'm calling the cops. I laughed. A deep, loud, liberating laugh that started in my belly and exploded out of my throat. Calling the cops to tell them what? That his mother-in-law took her own furniture out of her own apartment? I typed out a reply, but I didn't hit send. I deleted it. Silence is a far more effective torture for people who are used to being the center of attention. The food arrived. The smell of the steak filled the room. Rich, savory, elegant. A million miles away from the smell of bleach and cheap lavender. I cut a piece of meat, savored it, and closed my eyes. I was alone, yes, but for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel lonely. I had myself. I had Frances the businesswoman. I had Frances the mother. Even if my daughter had failed me, I had Frances the woman. Tomorrow would be the day for legal action. Tomorrow, I would see the lawyer. But tonight was for enjoying the show from a safe distance. Because I knew that in that dark, empty apartment, the real stench was just starting to rise. And this time, there was absolutely no one around to clean it up for them. I raised my wine glass toward the mirror. Cheers, useless old woman, I toasted myself. Let's see how they manage when the garbage stops paying the bills. I took a long sip. The wine was perfect, and the night was just getting started. Attorney Garrison's office smelled of antique wood and furniture wax, a serious aroma that commanded respect. A far cry from the smell of dampness and cheap air freshener I had left behind in my own apartment. I sat in the leather chair across from his desk, my back ramrod straight, my hands folded neatly over my purse. I wasn't there to ask for favors. I was there to give orders. So, Miss Francis, Garrison said, adjusting his glasses and reviewing the stack of paperwork I had handed him. You want to initiate an eviction process for at-will tenancy, basically because there is no lease and they don't pay rent. Exactly, Mr. Garrison. They have lived there entirely by my grace and my patience, both of which ran out last night at 3 in the morning. Taking notes with a fountain pen that scratched against the paper with a rhythmic, almost hypnotic sound. I liked that sound. It was the sound of things being done properly, without screaming or drama. The apartment is in your name. The utilities are in your name. And there is absolutely no document giving them the legal right to remain on the premises if you revoke consent, he continued, looking up. Legally, it's straightforward. Emotionally, it's usually the hard part. Are you entirely sure you want to proceed with the full force of the law against your own daughter? I looked him dead in the eyes. Garrison was a man in his 50s, who looked like he had witnessed 1,000 ugly family feuds. He probably expected me to hesitate, to pull out a tissue and start weeping over my poor Lucy. Mr. Garrison, for 40 years I ran a commercial kitchen. If an ingredient was rotten, it went straight into the garbage so it wouldn't ruin the whole stew. I answered, my voice steady. Not a single eyelash batted. My son-in-law called me a useless, stinking old woman. My daughter shut her mouth and validated him with her silence. I am not here for revenge. I am here for sanitation. Proceed. Understood. I will draft the notarized notice today. They have a legal window to vacate voluntarily. If they don't, we file the lawsuit. I want them served today, I insisted. At their jobs, if possible. I want them to feel the public humiliation. The exact same humiliation I felt in my own home. I walked out of that office with a profound lightness in my chest. The midday sun beat down hard on the street, bouncing off the city concrete. I felt like a five-star general who had just ordered the troops to advance. My phone, which I had kept on silent during the meeting, vibrated in my hand like a trapped bug. I looked at the screen. 37 missed calls. 20 from Robert, 15 from Lucy, and 2 from an unknown number that was probably an office phone. There was also a massive string of text messages and voicemails. I sat down on a park bench under the shade of a large oak tree and decided it was finally time to listen to the symphony I had composed. I put on my reading glasses and opened Robert's thread. "Francis, what is wrong with you? Come back right now and bring the stuff. The power is out. Did you forget to pay the bill? You're so useless. You probably forgot. Francis, I got home and there is nothing here. You stole my furniture. I am calling the police. You are out of your mind, you crazy old bat." I tapped on a voice note. His voice was distorted with sheer rage. He was screaming, and in the background I could hear Lucy crying softly. "Mom took the curtains, Robert. I don't even have a place to sit down." She was sobbing in the background. "Shut up, Lucy. Your mother lost her damn mind. This is theft. Francis, answer the damn phone." I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a cold, satisfied smirk. Robert, the man who thought he was the king of the castle, was just figuring out that his throne was borrowed and his crown was made of cardboard. What he called theft was simply me reclaiming my assets. I stood up and walked toward the bank. It was time for phase 2 of the operation, the financial strike. I walked into the local branch where I've kept my accounts since I was selling tamales out of a basket. The branch manager, Mr. Miller, waved at me from his glass cubicle. "Francis, so good to see you. Here to make your usual deposits?" "Not today, Mr. Miller. Today, I'm making corporate cutbacks, so to speak." I sat down across from him and pulled out my debit cards. "I want to cancel the authorized user cards under Robert Gomez and Lucy Morales, and I want to block any automatic transfers going from my account to theirs." Miller raised an eyebrow in surprise. He knew perfectly well that I transferred them a monthly allowance to help out. "Everything, Francis? Even the auto insurance for Mr. Robert's car?" "Especially the auto insurance," I said, drumming my fingers on his desk, "and their cell phone bills, and that gym membership they never even use." "Turn off the tap, Mr. Miller. I don't want a single drop getting through. They'll be overdrawn, ma'am. If they have auto drafts set up, they're going to bounce, and they'll get hit with overdraft fees." "That is exactly the point," I replied, holding his gaze. "I want them to learn that money doesn't grow on trees, and it doesn't magically appear out of this useless old woman's purse." I walked out of the bank feeling 5 years younger. I was hungry. I walked to a little diner I know that makes a decent chili, though they don't spice it quite enough for my taste. I asked for a table for one and turned my phone off. I didn't want their screaming to ruin my digestion. As I ate, I thought about them. By now, Robert had to be realizing this wasn't just a blown fuse. They had to have noticed the internet was dead. I pictured the apartment, empty, silent, starting to bake in the afternoon heat because the air conditioning was dead. The refrigerator. I dropped my fork. The refrigerator was stuffed with the groceries I bought on Sunday. Meat, dairy, vegetables. Without power, all of that was going to start rotting in a matter of hours in this heat. "The whole house stinks," he had screamed at me. The irony was so sweet, it was richer than the chili. Now the house really was going to stink. And this time, it would be the stench of his own total inability to solve a problem. I finished my lunch and turned the phone back on. A call came through instantly. It was Lucy. I decided that was enough silence. It was time to push the first domino right in front of their eyes. I swiped to answer. "Hello?" I said, my voice smooth and relaxed, like I had just woken up from a lovely nap. "Mom, Lucy's scream forced me to pull the phone away from my ear. Mom! Oh my God, where are you? We are freaking out. Robert is furious. Hi, honey. I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. Great? Mom? You took everything. The house is empty. We don't have power. We don't have hot water. Robert says he's going to sue you. Put him on, I said sharply. There was a brief struggle on the other end of the line, and then Robert's voice, panting and aggressive, blasted into my ear. Listen to me, you crazy old witch. You have exactly 1 hour to bring my stuff back and turn the power on. Or, I swear to God, I will hunt you down and drag you back here myself. This is abuse. I am a respectable man. Robert, lower your voice, I snapped, using the exact tone I used to scold meat suppliers who tried to sell me second-rate cuts. First of all, it's not your stuff. It's my stuff. I have the receipts for every chair, every painting, and every fork. Second, it's my house. The deed is in my name. And third, and this is the most important part, you are no longer welcome on my property. What the hell are you talking about? I live here. I have rights. You had privileges, Robert. Not rights. And you lost them last night when you decided my mere presence offended your nose. You complained the house stank because of me. Well, I eliminated the root of the problem. I left. Now, if the house stinks, it's on you. You can't do this to us, he roared, but I caught the tremor in his voice. Fear was starting to bleed through the cracks of his rage. We don't have the money to move anywhere else right now. At the end of the month, maybe, but not right now. That is not my problem. You're young. You're useful, right? Not like me. I'm sure you'll figure something out. Oh, and Robert? Check your work email. And you too, Lucy. My lawyer just sent you formal notice. You have 30 days to vacate the premises, and I highly suggest you use the daylight to pack. Because I seriously doubt the power company is in any rush to reconnect service to an account I just permanently closed. I hung up before he could say another word. I stared at the phone for a few seconds. My heart was beating a little faster, but not from fear. From the pure adrenaline of finally dropping the crushing weight I had been carrying on my back for 2 years. I stood up, paid the check, and left a massive tip. The waiter beamed at me. Thank you, ma'am. Have a wonderful afternoon. I will, son. Believe me, I will. I decided not to go back to the hotel just yet. I wanted to see it. I needed to see it. Not out of morbid curiosity, but to close the circle. I hailed a cab and told him to drop me off at the corner of my street, making sure he didn't pull up directly in front of the building. I walked into a coffee shop across the street. It had massive glass windows with a perfect view of the entrance to my building. I ordered an iced tea and sat down to watch. At 4 in the afternoon, I saw Robert walk out. His dress shirt was unbuttoned, his face flushed and dripping with sweat. He was pacing back and forth on the sidewalk, screaming into his phone, waving his arms in the air. He looked so small from across the street. He looked vulgar. Lucy came down a few minutes later. She had swapped her heels for sandals and pulled her hair into a messy ponytail. She sat down on the front steps, burying her face in her hands. It hurt to see her like that. I won't lie, she's my daughter. But sometimes, for a bone to set properly, you have to break it again. She had allowed that man to humiliate me. She had let him turn me into a maid in my own home. She needed to learn how to stand on her own 2 feet, far away from his shadow and my apron strings. Suddenly, a delivery van pulled up. It was from an electronics store. The driver got out and walked up to Robert. I watched Robert pull out his wallet, fish out a card, and swipe it on the portable terminal. The delivery guy shook his head. Robert tried a different card. The guy shook his head again. Robert started screaming at the poor kid, kicking the air. The delivery driver, a big, burly guy who clearly didn't get paid enough to deal with tantrums, just got back in his van and drove off, taking whatever portable AC unit or fan Robert had tried to panic buy right back to the store. The card had bounced. Mr. Miller worked fast. I watched Robert throw his wallet on the sidewalk and kick it, Lucy didn't even flinch. Right then, my phone buzzed. A text from Robert. Please, Francis, let's talk. Lucy feels sick. It's so hot in here. Don't be cruel. Cruel. The word blinked on the screen. I thought back to the night before. I remembered my shaking hand on the toilet handle. I remembered his sneer of disgust. I remembered exactly how I felt. Like trash, like a burden, like something to be thrown away. I typed my reply slowly, savoring every single letter. Cruelty, Robert, is telling the woman who puts a roof over your head that she stinks. What you are experiencing right now is not cruelty. It is reality. And reality costs money. If Lucy feels sick, take her to a hotel. Oh, wait. I hope you have cash. I hit send. Through the tinted glass of the coffee shop, I watched Robert pull his phone out and read the text. I saw him freeze. He went completely rigid. He looked up, his eyes scanning the street frantically. Looking for me. His gaze swept the cars, the buildings, the coffee shop. For one split second, our eyes met across the asphalt and the tinted glass. He couldn't actually see me, but I felt that he knew I was there. He knew the useless old woman was watching him from a position of absolute power he never imagined I possessed. His arms dropped to his sides. All the arrogance drained out of his posture, replaced by total defeat and profound confusion. I finished my iced tea. The ice clinked against the empty glass. It was time to go back to the hotel and prep for the next phase. Because this wasn't going to end with just cutting the power and the cash. Tomorrow, I had to face Lucy, and that was going to be the hardest battle of all. But today I got back something much more valuable than my furniture. I got my dignity back. I walked out of the coffee shop and headed toward the taxi stand, my head held high, my steps firm, leaving the couple melting on the concrete outside my building entirely behind. The lesson was just beginning, and I was the one holding the chalkboard, the chalk, and the eraser. The night in room 405 at the Plaza Hotel was the most peaceful I had experienced in years, but my phone wouldn't stop lighting up on the nightstand like a frantic firefly. I had muted the notifications, but the screen flashed every 10 minutes. Texts from Robert, calls from Lucy, voicemails from unknown numbers that were undoubtedly borrowed phones. I didn't answer. I let the silence be my response. The cold brick wall they were repeatedly crashing into. When I woke up, I ordered a full room service breakfast, eggs rancheros, fresh squeezed orange juice, and premium roast coffee. As I buttered a piece of warm toast, I pictured their morning. With no curtains, the morning sun would have hit them right in the face at 6 a.m., waking them up on a hard floor, with no coffee, no hot shower, and the foul stench of food rotting inside a dead refrigerator. Poetic justice sometimes smells like sour milk. At 9:00 a.m., I walked into Attorney Garrison's office. I wore my best tailored suit, a navy blue one I used to wear for bank meetings back when I took out the loan for the restaurant. I wore my pearls and styled my hair perfectly. The useless old woman was going to look immaculate. "Good morning, Miss Francis," Garrison greeted me, offering a chair. "Your tenants, or rather, your at-will occupants, have been calling my secretary since 8 o'clock. They are demanding to speak with you. They say it's a life-or-death emergency. To them, losing their comfort is death, Mr. Garrison." I replied, placing my hand fan neatly on his desk. "Tell them they can come in. I'm ready to receive them." We waited 20 minutes. When the office door opened, the sight that walked in was pathetic. Robert, who always bragged about his modern executive aesthetic, was wearing the exact same dress shirt from yesterday, wrinkled and stained with sweat rings under the arms. He had dark bags under his eyes, and the day-old stubble made him look dirty and unkempt. Lucy trailed behind him. Her eyes were swollen shut from crying. Her hair was greasy and tied in a messy bun, and she was wearing a dress she had clearly pulled from the dirty laundry pile because she had nowhere to iron anything else. The smell they dragged in with them instantly filled the air-conditioned office. They smelled of stress, stale sweat, and dampness. They smelled of defeat. Robert marched in first, fists clenched, but he stopped dead in his tracks when he saw me sitting there. Fresh, calm, hands folded neatly in my lap. "You!" he yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You are out of your mind. Do you have any idea what we went through last night? We slept on the floor. On the floor, Francis. Like dogs." "Good morning to you too, Robert," I said smoothly, flicking my fan open with a sharp snap of my wrist. "Take a seat, assuming you still remember how, since you clearly forgot how to treat human beings." "I'm not sitting down," he roared, stepping toward the desk. "I am suing you. You stole my peace of mind. You stole my furniture. You blocked my credit cards. That is illegal. I am your son-in-law, for God's sake." Attorney Garrison cleared his throat. The sound dropped like a heavy stone into a deep well. "Mr. Gomez, I highly suggest you lower your voice. You are in a law office, and everything you say can and will be used against you in the civil suit that is already underway. Furthermore, regarding the credit cards, it is my understanding that those accounts are the sole property of Miss Frances Morales, and you were simply authorized users, a privilege that has obviously been revoked." Lucy collapsed into one of the chairs across from me, sobbing. "Mom, please," she whimpered, burying her face in her hands. "We don't have any money. Robert tried to pay for breakfast today, and the card declined. We don't have gas in the car. We have nowhere to go. Why are you doing this to us? It was just one argument. Robert was just tired." I stared at her. My daughter, the little girl whose hair I used to braid, whose scraped knees I used to bandage. She was now a 35-year-old woman crying because Mommy took away her credit card. "It wasn't an argument, Lucy," I corrected her, snapping my fan shut and pointing it straight at her. "It was a revelation. Robert called me a burden, a useless old woman who stunk up the house. And you sat there and stayed quiet. Your silence signed the warrant." Robert slapped his open palm against the desk. It was the heat of the moment. He made excuses, though his eyes were darting around, looking for an out. "People say things, but you planned this. You're a calculating witch. You know what? I don't care. Keep your damn money. We're getting a lawyer and we're fighting for that house. We've lived there for 2 years. We have squatters' rights." I laughed. A short, dry bark of a laugh. "Go right ahead, Robert. Hire a lawyer," I said, pulling the old leather binder out of my purse. "But before you do, I think you should see this." I slid the binder across the desk toward him. "What is this?" he asked, suspicious. "Reality, Robert. Open it." He yanked it open. His eyes scanned the first document. It was a printed spreadsheet, rows and rows of numbers. "That is the grand total of what I have spent on you two over the last 24 months. I explained, tapping the paper. "Fair market rent for the apartment, $2,500 a month. Power, water, gas. The high-speed fiber optic internet, $200 a month. Your credit card bills, which I paid off, averaging $1,500 a month. Groceries. The cleaning service. Your car insurance. The loans you never paid back." Robert went completely pale. He flipped the page. "In total, Robert, you two have burned through nearly $75,000 of my savings in 2 years. $75,000 that I earned sweating over a hot stove, while you played big shot at an office that pays you peanuts." Lucy looked up, her jaw dropping. "That much, Mom?" she whispered. "Yes, honey, that much. And in exchange for that massive investment, what did I get? Screaming fits at 3 in the morning. Disgust. You treated me like an old piece of furniture blocking the hallway." Robert tossed the binder back onto the desk, desperately trying to scrape together whatever arrogance he had left. But he looked tiny, ridiculous. "Money isn't everything," he yelled, but his voice cracked. "We're family. Family is supposed to support each other. Support is a two-way street." "Boy," I fired back, standing up. I felt like a giant looming over them. "I supported you with my money and my blood, sweat, and tears. You supported me with insults. The social contract is permanently broken. We are not leaving, Robert insisted, though he sounded frantic now. I'll change the locks. You can't just throw us out like this. Attorney Garrison intervened smoothly, sliding an official document across the desk. Actually, Mr. Gomez, the locks were already changed this morning by a certified locksmith under my direct supervision, while you were on your way here. Your personal belongings, the clothes and the mattress you left behind, are currently being boxed up by a moving company and will be placed in a storage unit paid up for 30 days. Here is the address and the key to the padlock. Robert froze. His mouth opened and closed like a fish suffocating on a dock. Every ounce of color drained from his face. What? He stammered. You broke into the house? It is my house, Robert, I reminded him. And since I cut the power, the alarm system was dead. There was no need to break anything. Lucy started crying harder. A real, genuine panic attack. Where are we supposed to go, Mom? She wailed. We have zero cash. Robert is 3 months behind on the car payments. If we don't pay, they're going to repo it. Then let them repo it, I said. Merciless. Maybe then you'll learn how to walk. Walking is great for thinking, and you're going to need to do a whole lot of thinking to climb out of the hole you dug for yourselves. I walked over to the office window. Looking out, the city looked massive, indifferent. My heart ached. Of course it ached. Watching my daughter fall apart wasn't my idea of a fun Tuesday, but I knew, with the absolute certainty that only decades of hard life can give you, that if I handed them one single dime, I would be condemning them to be useless parasites forever. Mom! Lucy stood up and tried to hug me, but I took a step back. No, Lucy. Don't touch me with hands that refuse to defend me. She stopped, looking utterly shattered. I'm a useless old woman, remember? I continued, turning around to face them one last time. So useless, I don't even know how to flush a toilet. Well, this useless old woman just showed you that she knows how to wield something far more powerful. Capital. You thought I was weak because I was generous. You confused kindness with stupidity. Robert dragged his hands through his greasy hair, pulling at the roots. He looked like he was on the verge of a total nervous breakdown. Francis, please, he begged. And for the first time in 2 years, he used my name without a drop of sarcasm. We have nowhere to go. My parents live out of state. We don't have friends who can take us in this fast. Just give us a week. 1 week to get our stuff together. I am begging you. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had screamed, "You stink," at me less than 48 hours ago. Now he was the one reeking of sheer desperation. I reached into my purse and pulled out a white envelope. I dropped it on the desk. There's a $100 bill in there, I said. Robert's eyes lit up with a pathetic, desperate hope. That's enough for 2 nights at the Starlight Motel out by the highway. It's not the Plaza Hotel, but it has beds and a bathroom. And I highly suggest you conserve water, because they charge extra if you take too long in the shower. Robert stared at the envelope like it was a physical insult, but he grabbed it. He grabbed it because he had 0 options left. His pride was worth less than that $100 bill. 2 nights, I repeated. You have 48 hours to pick up an extra shift, sell that car you can't afford, or go beg for money from someone who doesn't know you as well as I do. Mom, you can't leave us like this, Lucy whispered. I already did. Sweetheart, and believe me, someday you will either thank me or you will hate me forever. But at the very least, you will respect me. I gave Mr. Garrison a nod. He stood up, signaling the meeting was over. Please vacate the premises, the lawyer said. Miss Morales has other business to attend to, and I must remind you that you are legally barred from approaching the building. Building security has your photographs and strict orders not to let you pass the lobby. Robert shoved the envelope into his pocket. He shot me a look of pure, unadulterated hatred mixed with terror, grabbed Lucy by the arm, and yanked her toward the door. Let's go, he muttered. Stop begging her. The old bat went crazy. She's going to die alone and rot with her money. Better to die alone than in bad company, I called out, my voice loud, clear, and steady. And don't worry about the money, Robert. I'll make sure to blow every last cent on vacations and fine wine before I kick the bucket. Wouldn't want you getting any inheritance. They dragged their feet out of the office. The door clicked shut. Final. Silence returned to the room. But this time, it wasn't a heavy silence. It was a clean silence. I sank back into my chair, feeling my legs shake just a little. Not from fear, from the adrenaline crash. It had been the hardest negotiation of my entire life, harder than any deal with a supplier or a health inspector. I had just negotiated the freedom of my own flesh and blood. Garrison looked at me with deep respect. You were very hard on them, Miss Francis. You have to cut gangrene off clean, Mr. Garrison, I said, pulling a handkerchief from my purse to dab away a single, rogue tear that had managed to escape. If I hesitated for 1 second, if I gave them a month, in 2 weeks they'd be right back on my couch, watching TV while I cooked their dinner. And what's next? He asked. I stood up and walked back over to the window. The sun was blinding over the city skyline. Down there, somewhere on the pavement, Robert and Lucy were trying to hail a cab with their $100, facing the real world for the very first time in years. I had my empty apartment, my full bank accounts, and a future that, for the first time in a very long time, belonged exclusively to me. Now, Mr. Garrison, I said, tucking my fan away, now I'm going to go buy new furniture. Furniture that I like. And maybe I'll hire a painter. I always wanted a yellow living room. But Robert thought it was tacky. Well, now my living room is going to be as yellow as the damn sun. And if they don't like it, they don't have to look at it. I picked up my purse. I felt the weight of my house keys. They were heavy, yes, but it was a wonderful weight. The weight of ownership. Oh, and Mr. Garrison, I added right before walking out, send me the invoice for your fees today. Unlike my son-in-law, I actually pay my debts in cash. I walked out of the building, taking my time, letting the city breeze hit my face. I didn't feel old. I felt seasoned. And the world, which just 2 days ago felt like a prison of ingratitude, now looked like a wide-open menu, just waiting for me to decide what I wanted to order. The useless old woman had just fired her bosses, and damn, did it feel good to own the company again? 6 months have passed since the moving truck hauled away the remains of my old life. And if I'm being completely honest, I still wake up smiling. My apartment is no longer that cave of neutral tones and pretentious modern decor that Robert insisted on keeping so it looked like a New York loft. Now, the living room walls shine in a brilliant canary yellow, the kind of color that forces you to be in a good mood whether you want to or not. And my furniture is heavy rustic wood, the kind of furniture that hugs you when you sit down and smells like beeswax and a real home. The first week was strange, I won't deny it. The silence, which used to crush me like a cement block, slowly morphed into music. There are no more slamming doors, no more screaming for ironed shirts at 7 in the morning, no more complaints that the smell of my cooking is ruining someone's designer clothes. Now, my house smells exactly how I want it to smell. Fresh rosemary, warm baked bread, floor wax, and above all, freedom. This morning, I woke up early, not from insomnia and not from a stomachache, but because I had work to do. I went to the bathroom, my newly renovated sanctuary. I ripped out that old, temperamental toilet that caused the whole disaster and had a brand new, high-efficiency model installed. I put out turquoise Egyptian cotton towels and sandalwood candles. Every single time I walk in there, I laugh to myself. Useless old woman, I tell the mirror as I wash my face with oatmeal soap. Just look at the palace you built with your uselessness. As I was brewing my coffee, Mexican spiced coffee with cinnamon and brown sugar, exactly how I like it. The kind they used to say tasted too rustic. The doorbell rang. It was Artie the mover. He comes by every Tuesday now, not to haul furniture, but to pick up deliveries. Good morning, Miss Francis, he boomed with his thunderous voice. Smells incredible in here. I've got the boys out in the truck, drooling already. Come on in, Artie. The coolers are ready to go. Because you see, A woman who has worked for 40 years doesn't just sit still. After kicking out the vampires, which is what I affectionately call my daughter and son, in-law in my head, I got bored by week 2, so I went back to doing what I do best, cooking. But this time, on my own terms. No restaurant, no grueling hours. I run Francis's Box, a homemade lunch catering service for office buildings. But I only make 50 meals a day. Not a single one more. It's subscription only, and there's a wait list. Artie loaded up the coolers with today's special. Slow-roasted pulled pork with collard greens and red rice. "Hey, Francis," he said right before leaving, lowering his voice and taking off his baseball cap. "I saw your girl the other day, Lucy." I felt a sharp prick in my chest, fast and stinging, like grease popping from a frying pan. My hand froze over the kitchen counter. "Oh, really?" I asked, forcing my voice to sound casual. "How did she look?" "Well, she was working over at that big shoe store downtown, the chain where they make you wear the uniform. She looked tired, Francis, skinny." He hesitated for a second, but she looked awake. She didn't have that dead-eyed look she used to get when she was dragging around with that husband of hers. I nodded, swallowing a cocktail of sharp pain and deep satisfaction. "Thanks for letting me know, Artie. Enjoy the food." When he closed the door, I stood staring out the window. I knew Lucy was working. I knew, because even though I cut the cash flow, I didn't cut my network. The building doorman, the lady at the corner store, even Attorney Garrison. Everyone brings me updates, even when I don't ask for them. Robert and Lucy lasted exactly 2 weeks in that cheap motel. Then they moved into a sweltering rooftop room in a rough neighborhood. The bank repoed the car a month later, and according to the grapevine, you could hear their screaming matches from 3 blocks away. Apparently, when hunger walks through the front door, Robert's love flies right out the window. I decided to go for a walk. I needed fresh air. I put on my new coat, a gorgeous red trench coat I bought with the money I used to waste paying their internet bill, and went downstairs. The neighborhood greets me differently now. I used to be the old lady who lives with her daughter. Now, I am Ms. Francis, the boss. Mrs. Gertrude, the nosy neighbor, stopped me in the lobby. "Francis, you look stunning. Hey, they told me your chili last week was award-winning. When are you going to invite me over for a bowl?" "When you learn how to stop asking about other people's business, Gertrude," I replied with a wicked wink. She burst out laughing. I walked down to the farmer's market. I like picking out my own vegetables. As I was inspecting a pile of avocados, I heard a familiar voice right behind me, a whiny, aggressive voice that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "I'm telling you it's unfair, boss. I have experience. I was a project manager." I turned around slowly, staying hidden behind a pyramid of oranges. It was Robert. He was arguing with the owner of a butcher shop, clearly begging for a job or trying to hustle him. He looked terrible. The sharp executive suits were long gone. He was wearing faded jeans and a polo shirt that stretched tight over his gut. His hair was long and greasy. But the worst part was his posture. Hunched over, defeated. Yet he still had that same spark of stupid, unearned arrogance in his eyes. The butcher, a man who doesn't tolerate nonsense, waved a meat cleaver at him dismissively. "You come here to work, kid, not to give orders. And you've got hands that look like they've never touched a broom in their life. Step aside, you're scaring away my paying customers." Robert spun around, his face beet red with rage, and he saw me. Our eyes locked through the smell of raw meat and fresh cilantro. I waited for him to scream. I waited for him to make a scene, to call me a useless old woman all over again. But he didn't. He opened his mouth, closed it, and dropped his head. He looked at my brand new leather shoes, my red coat, my bags full of premium groceries. Then he looked down at his own filthy sneakers. The shame radiating off him was so thick, I could practically touch it. He turned around and walked away fast, disappearing into the crowd, running away from the woman he had tried to break. I didn't feel pity. I felt balance. Sometimes the universe just needs a little push to put things exactly where they belong. I walked home with a quiet heart. I made myself a simple lunch, chicken noodle soup with giblets. Simple and comforting. I sat at my oak table, the one I took back, which now sported a beautiful hand-embroidered tablecloth. When I finished, I noticed an envelope had been slid under my front door. There was no postage stamp, it just said Mom in Lucy's rounded handwriting. I poured myself a glass of red wine before opening it. My hands didn't shake. Not anymore. I tore it open. Inside were three $50 bills and a ripped piece of notebook paper. Mom, I know this doesn't cover even a fraction of what we owe you. I know $150 is a joke compared to the $75,000 we blew through, but it's what I have left from my paycheck after paying rent for my room and buying groceries. Robert left. Well, actually, I kicked him out 3 days ago. When we lost everything, I realized he wasn't mad about losing me. He was mad about losing your wallet. He screamed at me. He told me I was just as useless as you. And in that exact moment, Mom, I heard your voice in my head. I heard you say that dignity doesn't have a price tag. I told him to get the hell out. I told him if I was so useless, then he didn't need my retail salary to buy his dinner. He moved back in with his mother. I stayed here. I'm working at the shoe store. I'm on my feet all day. My feet hurt worse than they ever have. I get home dead tired, and my hands are getting calloused from hauling inventory boxes. But Mom, it's my money. Nobody handed it to me. And for the first time in my entire life, when I buy a loaf of bread, it tastes like heaven because I paid for it with my own sweat. I'm not asking you to forgive me yet. I don't deserve it. I was a coward and a terrible daughter. But I promise you that every single month, you are going to get an envelope just like this one, even if it takes me 100 years to pay you back. Thank you for slamming the door in my face. It was the only thing that forced me to open my eyes. Lucy, I set the letter down on the table. A single tear rolled down my cheek. But it wasn't a tear of sadness. It was pure relief. It was the tear of a gardener who had to hack off a diseased branch and was finally watching a strong, green shoot break through the bark. Lucy had left Robert. That was the real victory. Not the money. Not the furniture. My daughter had cut the parasite loose because I taught her, in the cruelest way possible, that a woman doesn't need to carry the weight of a man who's actively drowning her. I picked up the $150. I could have kept it. I could have donated it. But I decided to do something better. I walked into my bedroom, opened my floor safe, and slipped the cash into a brand new envelope. On the front, I wrote, Lucy's Business Fund. I wasn't going to tell her. Not yet. I would let her keep working, let her keep sweating, let her keep learning exactly what a dollar is worth. But someday, when she was truly ready, when her hands were as calloused and wise as mine, I would hand every single cent back to her, multiplied, so she could build an empire of her own. Evening fell over the city, painting my yellow living room in deep shades of orange. I sat back in my favorite armchair and put my feet up. My phone buzzed, a message in the building's group chat. Ms. Francis, is it true you're organizing the building's Christmas dinner this year? Everyone is saying if you aren't cooking, they aren't coming. I smiled and typed back, you bet I am. But no dry turkey. We're doing slow-roasted brisket. And bring your own wine, I'm not running a charity. I hit send and locked the phone. I looked around. This was my kingdom. A kingdom built with decades of blood and sweat, defended tooth and nail, and reclaimed with pure strategy. I thought about the word useless. What a funny little word. Useless is the person who can't survive without sucking the blood out of someone else. Useless is the person who screams because they have absolutely no leverage. Useless is the person who thinks getting old is a disease, rather than a masterclass in survival. I, Francis, 68 years old, with my varicose veins and my morning backaches, am anything but useless. I am the matriarch who saved her family by burning it to the ground first. I am the businesswoman who reinvented herself when everyone else thought she was put out to pasture. I am the woman who finally learned that self-love smells like bleach, balanced checkbooks, and freshly brewed coffee. I stood up and walked into the kitchen to prep the dough for tomorrow's pot pies. My hands, wrinkled and covered in age spots, sank into the warm, soft dough. I felt the texture, the life, the raw power of creating something magnificent out of nothing. The whole house stinks, I whispered, remembering that scream in the dark hallway. I took a deep breath. It smelled like vanilla. It smelled like butter. It smelled like utter victory. No, Robert, I said to the empty room, kneading the dough with all my strength. The house doesn't stink. The house finally smells like me. And as the sun finally dipped below the skyline, I let the dough rest, knowing that tomorrow, just like me, it would rise up, ready to feed the world. Because old women like me don't rot. We cure, we season, and in the end, we are the secret ingredient that makes the whole damn thing worth it.